What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Urstory. We're here with an OG, a guy that's been in the industry since the 80s, Mr. Steve. So Steve owns Ultimate Ceramic Coating and PPF out of Kemah, Texas. So welcome, brother.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Appreciate it, man. Cheers.
We already opened our beers. We already had it started to roll. And
we had to get warmed up.
Yeah, we had to get nice and thirsty, so we're good. I had to quench it. So why don't you talk about your beer of choice today?
So my beer of choice today is a local Houston brewery called Carbach, and this is a Love Street. It's a light blonde, just something smooth and easy to drink. Just keep me chill.
It's tasty.
It is tasty.
One thing we have to talk about too is CarPro and Sky's the Limit Car Care, which decided to sponsor your story.
Fantastic.
So when Corey heard that we were going to be here, he wanted to be a big part of that. So as you can see here, all the CarPro products that we have, we also have Rupes too. All of this is exactly what Corey and everybody at Sky's the Limit Car Care carry. Just one of the quickest shipping out there.
Outstanding. Right? If you reach out to Corey, I think it's before 2 p.m.
Yep.
Same day shipping.
Yeah. So
bam.
Out the door,
Done.
especially from Florida to here.
Customer service, if they had something that showed up that was on their website and said it was in stock, and they realize that it's not in stock, you're going to get an email or a text message almost immediately, because they're already going and looking to pack that order as soon as somebody submits the order. Fantastic people.
And one of the coolest things was when we were there for Verge. I was walking around his warehouse and seeing the facility, and not just that, but meeting his team,
yes.
Which is super important. But it's cool how the order comes in, and just seeing the full setup that they have there. Super close, tight-knit group of guys and gals.
Absolutely. It's just funny, like you sit there and you look at that facility now, and it's grown. I don't know if you'd seen Corey's previous facilities.
Well, he started out of his garage. And
I've seen a couple of them, and knowing his story, the guy is just unbelievably dedicated. He's got an unbelievably dedicated team. Watching the little processes and the little things, the little extra attention to detail things that Corey's always done. Packaging of things, like he understands that for a detailer, if you ship me a foam pad that's crushed on one side, it's permanently destroyed.
Yeah.
They go into a box in a manner every single time where when you open that box up, your stuff is good. So you don't just receive some random detailing stuff that might be good, might be bad. He's like consistent, spot on every time. I've dealt with Corey for we're pushing 6 years now, and
that's awesome.
Pretty good relationship along the way, and lots of communication.
Yeah,
fantastic resource too. Big
time resource, because he uses all the products too. So he's testing every single. That's how he got into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was doing those,
back in the Auto Geek forum days,
yep.
doing product testing.
He's like write-ups and stuff, right?
Write-ups. That's how he got involved with Seaports and Avi.
Yep.
I've read up on that history. I wasn't quite there for that. That was in the gap in my career where I wasn't quite doing professional detailing at that time. But I've read a lot of that history, and he wrote a lot of product reviews, tested a lot of products. He's done a ton of demonstration videos. Like, yep. I've never known anybody, this is going to be humor, but I've never known anybody in my life that could make the original Seaports UK look so simple to install. But if you've ever seen his old video on that, he's putting it on one of his personal cars in the driveway in Orlando, Florida. Can you imagine trying to mess?
Hell no.
No way. Challenges.
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cool and what actually Sky's the Limit Car Care and you guys share, which we'll get into, is the family aspect of the group you have working with you every single day. When we walked in here and obviously getting to know your team last night and hearing their stories this morning, this is a big family-focused facility first, which is everything that you guys do here is exactly the same feeling that I got when I walked into Sky's the limit down in Florida.
He kind of like, if you know Corey, you kind of have to use him as an example for so many little areas of building and growing a business, establishing a culture, understanding your customers, just so many aspects of what he does. There's like he's a great model. I don't care what your business is, but just understanding his business and his concept and his execution, he's such a great model for, I don't care what business you're in.
Yep.
That level of customer service is one of the things that we've always, like, to me, at the core of what I do is make a promise and at the very least keep the promise I made, if not exceed it. And this is one of those things you get from Corey every day of the week.
Yeah.
I love the dude. I don't talk to him enough. I wish I was closer and I got to talk to him more. I wish he wasn't as busy as he is. Like, it's become more and more challenging to talk to Corey over the years. But if you knew him 5 years ago, he was considerably more reachable.
Yep.
Now he's just like going and blowing.
Which is so cool.
Like was he have 6,000 square feet now?
Yep.
Something like that. It's huge.
But his team's picked up. His team's picked up the slack. Or not the slack, but the
Every single one
souls.
of them is amazing.
They're so cool.
Yeah.
I love their handwritten notes. I love putting it in our orders. Every time we're on Sky's the Limit and we go and put our order through, I'll make a comment, like something fun and hilarious. And the handwritten note that comes in every single box, they're writing something right back to me. So
yeah, I mean, it's usually
it's
like
dialogue.
if I could slow down enough the day that I'm clicking buy on an order, it's usually something like, "Thanks for being so awesome."
Yep.
And every once in a while you get, they'll be like, "Yeah, thank you."
Yeah.
They'll see it and I love it. I mean, it's cool, but I forget sometimes how many people in my life I need to be saying thank you to. You get busy.
a great
Life
message.
catches up to you.
Well, before we jump into that, we just got to say thank you, Corey. Thank you to everybody at Sky's the Limit Car Care. Make sure there's plenty of detailing distributors out there and wholesalers and resellers. But we choose Corey every single day. We choose everybody at Sky's the Limit because of who they are, because of what their vision is and what they believe in, and because they're always willing to lend a helping hand if need be.
And spectrum of products,
Oh.
availability, support for the products,
Yep.
knowledge of the products. So when you're confused about what you need or how you're going to use something, they're there. They're there to answer those questions for you.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Corey.
thank you, Corey.
everybody.
Love you, bro.
Absolutely. All right, Steve. So let's get into it's time for your story.
Okay.
And I'm excited for this one because, like I said, you're an OG. You've been doing this for so long. But not just that, but you've been basically, 33 jobs you've gone through, which we'll get into. But you fell back on this.
Yeah.
And
this
you've
is a
built
good fallback.
Yeah, and you've built this incredible place too in this facility, especially where you're at. Still able to support your love for fishing too. So why don't we get into it? Why don't you give us a little cliff notes of exactly what your story is?
Born, do I have to tell you the year? Does anybody want to know how old I am?
I mean, I kind of do.
Ah,
I'll give you a hug.
you give me a hug?
Yeah.
Sweet. I was born in 1968 in
All right.
Austin, Texas. Lived in Austin for the first 16 years of my life. The day after my 16th birthday, and this was sort of a punishment, I'm sorry, Mom, I got to go live with my dad in Miami, Florida. It was sort of like my mom had to raise me and an older brother as a single mom who was full-time working mom, and it was pretty, we were challenging, without a doubt. We were challenging boys. So moved to Miami, Florida. Oh gosh, we're gonna do jobs. The job history actually starts at probably like 12.
At the age of 12?
Yeah.
What was that? What was your first job?
Delivering newspapers. I'm that old. So I'm
Were
the.
you
Did you
chucking them out of
remember?
a
Did you
car?
ever see one of those old movies where they had a kid that rode on a bicycle? He had that big over-the-shoulder satchel thing that had newspapers in the front,
Yeah.
newspapers in the back.
This is you?
Bam.
Nice.
Yeah, that was. I think that's the very first. Am I gonna have to like relive the list of all these
We don't have
jobs?
to go through all of them. Let's go through the good ones. Though.
Oh,
Well, let's. I
goodness.
got a
Well,
question.
I built bicycles for a guy in Austin one summer
Yeah.
at a bicycle shop. I assembled BMX bikes. I always went and looked to do things that I had some interest in, that I actually liked, and I thought was like, this is cool. So I was scared of everything mechanical as a young kid, and that was like an opportunity to learn how to work on the BMX bike that I was racing at the time.
Where were you racing it?
Little local track in Austin. I never got
Yeah.
Mom never had any money for me to do anything legit. Literally the first bike that I raced on, I think I did, you're making me think about things I haven't thought about in a long time. The first race I did was on a Rampar, cheap, like probably $100 bicycle that Mom could afford for me. And I raced like 5 times on that bike and could never.
What was the bike at the time? Do you remember? What?
So the one that I bought with my own money at 14 years old was, did you ever see the movie E.T.?
Yeah.
Do you remember the bike with the yellow tires in the movie?
course.
Black frame bike. It's called a Kuwahara. It was a
Cool.
Japanese bike that got imported around that time, and it was like the coolest thing in the world. I remember when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, I've got to have this. So worked through all this summer jobs and every bit of collecting money that I possibly can to buy a $387 bicycle as a 14-year-old kid.
This was in the 70s, early 80s, I guess it would be. I'm sorry to age it.
Early 80s.
So that's a lot of money.
Early 80s. It was a little, yeah, for sure. And especially for a kid that couldn't get a legit job. I'm underage still. So
This is all through newspapers.
paper routes, mowing
Yeah.
lawns, doing things that I could do. simpler times, you could actually do things like that. Now there's lawn service that comes to your house. So I bought this Kuwahara and I got to race on it 3 times, and then I have a sad story after that. The 3 races on that bike were 2 firsts and a second, just in a change of gearing and a better, lighter, more nimble bicycle. So that was cool. Those were fun times.
Is that the time, would you say that's what started your love for racing? Because you'd hit the track in your car now, right? Your S2000.
Yeah.
Is that kind of where it all started, was on the bike?
You know, probably. In retrospect, I've always loved everything that was fast.
Yeah.
Everything that was fast. And the early, track, operating motor vehicles on a track was motorcycles. So I'd always wanted a motorcycle. Grew up riding bicycles and the skateboards. Skateboards don't really go fast, but it was like another cool thing. So in 1991, I moved back to Austin from Miami. So I moved to Miami in '84. Your expression. I was there when it looked like Miami Vice.
The cocaine cowboys, what I call it, right?
It was like the cocaine capital. That was the port for drugs to come into North America.
Yeah.
It was bad. It's crazy stuff.
What was it like? What was the environment like when you were there? Because you were still, I don't want to age it again, but...
I was 16 when I moved there.
And how long were you there
16 in
for?
1984, lived there for 7 years. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so finished up
yeah.
high school, kind of started my semi-adult working life. I still wasn't an adult. I'm not an adult now, so I can't really say that there's an adult working life for me.
Sure.
I'm going to try to be a kid for as long as I can. Miami was pretty crazy. I worked at an airport, a little private airport, fueling airplanes and doing other stuff associated with airplanes at that time. And we had instructors that worked for that facility that were flight instructors. One of those flight instructors, when I was still in high school, crashed an airplane at night flying at about 150 feet off the ground.
What?
And I'm not really sure that I could estimate why, but from what I know, it was because things fell out of airplanes sometimes back then in Miami. Seriously.
I get what you're getting at.
Well, I have a funny memory. That facility always had an attractive girl that worked the front counter. And so when we were bored and we didn't have a whole lot going on, you're standing there with one of your other coworkers and at the counter BSing, and this, I want to say, I don't even know what nationality it was. A Hispanic customer comes in and he's just standing there. He's trying to flirt with the pretty girl behind the counter, and this goes on for a couple of minutes, and she decides it's time to hit him with a fun punch, and she says, you haven't made any payments on your flight school account in a while. And he goes, oh yeah, how much money do I owe you? And she comes up with a number, I don't remember what it was, $1,500, $2,000, something like that for his flight school payments. Walks out to the Ferrari, comes back in with a briefcase, smacks the briefcase down on the front counter, flips it open, and it's full of bills. And I'm just like, I'm 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid, I'm just like,
Damn.
what does he do? Amazing I never got into that business. The offers.
Probably for the best.
The offers. Yeah, if it wasn't for the thought in the back of my head constantly that said, your family will kill you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was so much easy money to be, the offers that I had to do things back then that I declined.
So you saw Miami be built then, right? Because that's when Miami was basically...
it was already a big place. So for me, it was like this enormous culture shock change. Austin,
Sure.
Texas was less than 100,000 people when I left.
Oh, it's completely shifted now.
Small town. Very small town friendly, you're driving down the road, it's like driving out in the country where you drive by somebody and they're like, oh hey, and they wave at you. Austin was still kind of that way when I left.
Yeah.
Moved to Miami, it was nearly 1 million people. It was
So
the
big.
year that they built the Metro Rail system in Miami. It was when I hit the ground there.
Damn. That's so cool.
Yeah, so just crazy times. Fun. Neat place. Of course, there might have been some partying that happened. I don't know. I don't recall exactly.
Sure.
Yes.
That's for off camera.
Yes.
So is that when did this love for fishing come into play then? Was that when you got there with the water around you?
Even before. So as a kid, like I said, every summer I'd go see Dad in Florida.
Yeah.
And my dad was always an avid fisherman, and then his older brother, my uncle, actually guided in the Keys for
that's cool.
35-ish years.
Nice.
Between running a construction company down there, commercial construction company, and his love of fishing, he guided for a long time. And so we kind of in chat talked about this a little bit. I was blessed in a lot of respects to be born into a family that was absolutely at the forefront of fishing in shallow water, saltwater fishing in South Florida. So, and I didn't know as a kid. I had no idea what I had.
Yeah.
It was just like, Dad takes me fishing, right?
Yep.
So I'm on these little poling skiffs at probably 5 to 6 years old, learning how to sight cast to redfish down there. So pretty incredible experiences, and didn't know who any of these friends were that my dad and my uncle had, that are like, if you look up the who's who of saltwater fishing, these guys are the legends. These guys are the complete
still
legends.
today?
Some of them are gone now. So I mean, like, you know, they would be the ones that are still alive are high 70s and up.
And these
Some
are
of them
guys,
are past.
And these are guys that you learn from.
But yeah, these are guys that are like the books are written about. So these are the people that my uncle hung around. My uncle was actually the guide boat for the first television show that one of the really, really famous saltwater fishing show guys ever filmed in the early 80s. So yeah, it was cool.
That's so
Super cool. So, and I had no, like I said, when I was a young kid, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that just was like, that was my summers. My grandfather here in Texas, my family has a little piece of property out in central Texas that's on a spring-fed creek.
Cool.
And they put largemouth bass in it. So like the other side of me and fishing, they had to stock it because they're non-native bass there.
Okay.
But my early childhood experience was some fishing with him was literally like we had a seine net, and we have a little dam that he had built in front of our property. So we'd net minnows, put them in a bucket, put them on a hook underneath a bobber. And that was the start. But the funniest thing, like I had this fascination with fishing with artificials, not with bait. Hyperactive.
What's the difference?
So man-made lures versus taking a natural animal that a fish would eat and feeding it to them. So like I always wanted to trick them.
Yeah.
So as a young kid, my grandfather, like we had a little shed building that had his fishing equipment in it, and there was this little tiny tackle box in it. It had a bunch of lures, and he never used them. He just really never dealt with that. And I would always like go in there and look at it and was like, what is that? Do these things actually work? And so I started playing around, and it's cool because that environment is crystal clear water. You can see every fish, you can see every reaction they have to what you're doing, and it's like kind of like this progressing, learning, how do I make this thing work to actually make the fish think that it's food that it wants to eat?
I love that.
I'm a
So what's
uber complex person.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
I can. Were you in waders at the time, or were you on shore?
A lot of that was shore there. Florida, nobody wade fished.
Okay.
Florida,
And this is all fly fishing.
Florida's
right?
lots and lots of sharks, right?
Yeah.
So like you guys have all asked me these questions about Galveston Bay and sharks. I'm like, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
It's not that bad here. But the other thing is where we fished in Florida is the end of the mainland part of Florida is Everglades National Park.
Yep.
And it's basically, I don't know how many millions of years of South Florida all running off. All of this water flow that comes down South Florida. So it's the muckiest stuff you've ever imagined in your life. Like if you got out of a boat in the Everglades National Park in most places, you would be lucky if you stopped sinking into the mud at maybe belly button deep kind of thing. Like some places you just kind of don't stop. It's just this mass flow of silt that's run off of South Florida for years. Yeah, so you don't get out of a boat. So that's where the whole little boat like mine, poling skiffs kind of came from that, because there was just no way to get to the fish shallow without creating a boat that could go shallow and then a system to get it there and be able to chase and catch the fish.
Wow. Do you still have, a love every time that fish gets locked onto your lure? Is it the same feeling that you've had when you were a young kid doing it with your grandpa?
In a lot of senses, yes. I've grown, like I'll admittedly say I grow jaded about things. Like you do things enough, and it's like the level of excitement is not exactly the same. So my thrill in fishing now, because all I do is with artificial lures, whether conventional tackle like spinning rod or bait caster type rod, or with a fly rod, my thrill is convincing the fish to eat something that they shouldn't be eating. Like, it's plastic or it's feathers. Or
so you're having fun with it.
That's the thrill. Like I don't even care if I don't care about the fighting part anymore. Fighting a fish is some fish.
Just getting them to latch on.
Just having tricked an animal into eating what you're trying to make them eat. there's a stalking side to the kind of fishing that I do too. So you do what I do, which is called sight fishing, where we're literally in very, very shallow water and trying to maneuver the boat close enough to fish that we can see them and then cast to them. So it's like a hunting and fishing thing combined. I just pick challenging things to do in life.
And this is what you started teaching then, right? So you started taking people out.
So before I started guiding, I had gotten into fly fishing again because of my uncle, and got introduced to it, spent an entire summer beating myself silly trying to figure it out with no instruction, with no education, no knowledge really of how to do it. And I got fairly proficient, met some friends that I got to fish with that helped me along a little bit. When I moved back to Texas, I'd always had this goal in mind that I thought I wanted to be a fishing guide. I thought that was what I wanted to do. That was one of those things that I was most passionate about. And leading into that, I was like, there's some steps. You have to go get a license through the Coast Guard. You have to do some things and some backgrounding to actually become a fishing guide. But as much as I was involved with fly fishing, I was like, I could be a casting instructor.
Yeah.
So I reached out to a local guy and found out what it was going to require to do that. Went and did one casting, the only casting lesson I've ever had in my life that was a legitimate casting lesson with this gentleman here in the Houston area. And he kind of gave me some instruction on what the testing would be for me to test. There's a written and a performance, physical performancing side of casting, a bunch of different casts that you have to be able to do. Told me what those were, said, you probably don't really need a ton of practice, so just let me know when you're ready and we'll go ahead and do the test. So I tested. 1998, I started teaching people how to cast fly rods. And safe to say in the Houston area, it's upwards of 500 that I've taught. We used to actually put on schools here. I had me and
just in the Houston area.
Yeah. And then I got to
were
travel.
people coming in for this, or is this
Well,
locals?
it was more local, so marketed through local shops. This is before the huge advent of the internet, being able to create things where you could spread word even farther. So a lot of information through local shops and local level marketing that we could accomplish. Let's see, we did a handful of schools. I had some, the year after I got licensed as through the Coast Guard to actually start guiding. So to take passengers on a boat, you have to get a license from the Coast Guard it's affectionately called a captain's license, but it's actually OUPV, which is Operator of Uninspected Passenger Vessel. So up to 6 passengers, so small boat stuff.
Yep.
You're going to get to a bigger boat like these guys that run offshore boats or run a party boat or something like that. They have to go more steps up that chain of licensing. So our license is honestly pretty simple, and it's accomplished that and started guiding, continued the teaching, wrote for what was at the time the biggest saltwater fishing magazine in the state of Texas for a couple of years.
You were published in it?
Yeah. There's some past publication in my life. Like it's silly, just like if I get into something, I'm fully immersed.
You do it.
I have more or less one speed. I want to be the best that I can possibly be at anything that you give me to do. So yeah, pushed that stuff pretty hard, wrote a lot, was on radio a lot, actually got to film a television show that was on national cable television. Early on in my guiding career, fished a lot of tournaments, got to travel around the Gulf Coast for saltwater fishing tournaments. I had tons of fun with that. It was like great times. The drawback was it's a very tough way to make enough money to support a family. And at that point, two young daughters, and recently divorced, realized that was just that wasn't going to pull me through the things that I needed to pull through in life, and I wanted to be able to give my kids things that I kind of didn't have.
Yeah.
So
when did you make that decision, and then what came after that?
It's weird. It's kind of like my detailing career, in it, then out of it, and then back in it.
Sure.
I started guiding. I got my captain's license in late 1999, and that was the year that my younger daughter was born. I had a job, and we didn't get this. I had a job in a chemical plant, which is a pretty common thing to do here. You get to work shift work.
Gosh. The chemical plants on our drive down here. It's like 50 miles, and it goes deep.
Biggest concentration you'll ever see in your life.
It was incredible.
So I worked as what's called a process operator in a chemical plant, and you work shift work schedule. So you work 12-hour rotating shifts. So we're That plant was 2 days on, 2 days off, and then 3-day weekends. So you either worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or you were off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The tougher part is that you flip back and forth between one set is days, 2 days off, next set is nights. 2 days off, which ends up being a day and a half off.
Yep.
But I was guiding around that, and then
So you'd guide and then go to work,
guide on my days
or
off.
days off.
On my days off, basically. If before we had a cool calendar like you're able, and I was writing things in a calendar, and I wasn't always remembering whether or not I was getting off of days or getting off of nights.
Yeah.
There were some occasions where I would get off work at 5 o'clock in the morning, go home, scramble, put the boat together, and go meet a customer at a boat dock at like 6:30 in the morning.
Yep.
And that's after working a 12-hour shift and being up for already probably 15.
Jeez.
And then try to muster your way through a day of guiding somebody and trying to teach them how to fish and help them accomplish a goal in fishing. So those were tough. Those are tough, and young kids, just all sorts of challenges.
Yeah, and that brings a great point too, and it becomes a factor in a lot of people's lives, especially in our industry when they start having children, right? And can you speak about when you became a dad and how that affected not just work life too, but your personal life?
Oh, I mean, to me, I guess the most notable things are just how much it changes you and your perspective on life. Where your focuses are, where you direct your energies, because all of a sudden it's not, you go from, as a young individual, it's me. I got to move out of my parents' house. I'm going to live for me, right? So you're purely driven by what can I do that's fun for me, what can I do that's cool for me, what can I do that makes money for me, creates pleasure for me, to how do I take care of those two lives?
Yeah.
You're like, they got to have it better than I did, some way, but they've also got to know everything I know. They've got to know more than I know if I can, be prepared for the world. Like I was, as a parent, I of course you want to shelter kids from things, and I have the 2 daughters. My 2 biological are daughters. I have 4 kids total that are mine that I've raised, but 2 biological and then 2 through marriage. So 3 girls in total, and your goal is like protect and provide. Be the best that you can. So, but you also have to kind of grasp that you can't shelter someone totally from what reality is. You don't want them to know until they need to know, but you also need to prepare them for what's going to happen. It's like I used to have little things that I would tell the kids, like they're getting into high school and they're thinking, we were starting to talk about college, and I was like, yeah, high school's pretty cool. Like it's easy times. They're like, no, some of these classes are hard, Dad. I was like, no, high school's, it's not bad. Go to college.
Yeah.
I said, the other fun thing that you're going to grasp immediately, your first semester in college, is that all that education that you've had up to that point, everybody who was teaching you had a job to make you pass. Go to college, they don't care. Their job is to teach a class. And so I set all 4 of the kids up. I was like, listen, you go to college, they don't care if you pass. They don't care if you show up. There's no attendance. It's your turn to do or die. So you have to go, you have to show up, you have to learn, you have to perform, and you have to pass it. And the teacher doesn't care. But that's the rest of our lives, right? Like you go to work for somebody, their job isn't to make you happy. Their job is to provide a position for you to come to, accomplish a goal, and receive compensation for the goal, right? And so the rest of our lives, I used to always tell them, I said, nobody in the world is going to care about you as much as your parents do. No matter what you think, no matter how much you think I'm a hard ass or a jerk for some of the things that I say to you and some of the things that I push you to, no one will ever care to see your success like I do.
It still lives true today.
Oh, absolutely. And they know it.
Doesn't matter what age it is, right?
No, but I mean, like, that to me, those were some of the most fundamental parts of being a dad, is like, how can I prepare them for what's going to happen after me? After you climb out from underneath my wing, what's the world going to do to you?
Yeah.
And it's brutal.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
One of the cool dad daughters is actually the guys that are in this room, Michael and Chris, that you see, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's always been, even asking Michael when we first got to know them, it was like, hey, what's the best time of your life? And he always looks, and it wasn't when he grew his business and sold it. It wasn't when he was in college having a blast. It wasn't when he basically changed the whole area of medicine and saved millions of lives. What it is right now, building this company with his kids and being able to spend every day with them. And you could share a story, I think, that you had at Verge with them. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that was
talking.
my first perception and just like immediate connection to Michael and the business and you're able was just to see, we're sitting there at I don't know what's Verge year before last since we skipped.
Yep.
Or no, we were right before. So it would have been 2020 Verge. What was, would you say 80?
What was that?
80 guys.
Oh, easily.
80 to 100 of
basically half the installers.
The guys that you would consider some of the absolute best detailers in North America, right?
100%,
Like the
yep.
top of the top. And sitting there, not really knowing much about the software, I'd heard of it before, and knowing that I needed something in my shop, and for me to find the time to go out and search out what was going to be there for software. I'd already heard of Able, and then I found out they were there. I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the front. Like all you other guys talking about how to detail cars, I just kind of backed out. I've been there, sort of done that. I may have a mindset that thinks I know more than I don't. But anyway, I go to the front of the room, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching Chris give a presentation. And I noticed that Michael was sitting on the other side of we had a little open center walking aisle, and Michael's sitting on the other side on the front row. And through the presentation, I'm watching and I'm going, man, wow. I couldn't do a presentation anywhere near that good. Spot on, just point after point after point, facet, assets, all of what this software does. And I'm looking over at Michael, and he's just sitting there with kind of a peaceful, calm smile on his face. Like,
I know that.
That's it. That's my kid. So when it all came to an end and everybody started getting up and filtering out, Michael's still sitting down, I'm still sitting down, I'm waiting for the right opportunity. Whoever was sitting next to him gets up and walks away, and I walked over and I sat down and literally leaned my shoulder over to Michael's shoulder, and I just looked at him and I said, you got to be incredibly proud. Like, that to me is amazing, and the coolness of the family aspect of the company and the depth and dedication that they have to what they do is amazing. And it shows. I mean, it shows because I chose one software, and that will be the only software that I will use. It does so many things that I don't even know how to function with yet.
Yep.
It's like I could probably pick up the phone and grow a lot more from just understanding more of what's available to me in that tool. But we probably utilize 25-30% of what's there in that system right now.
It's customizable to you.
Yeah, I need to learn more.
Yeah, well, the family dynamic too extends out to just your blood basically in this place. Meeting all your team, and even here when we were doing their interviews this morning, how they walk in every day and they don't see it as work, and that's a big thing for you.
It was huge for me to just hear that back, because day to day it's a grind, and
You mean hearing it back just this morning? Just having
I mean just because we're busy. I mean, we're as a predominantly 3-person team with me bouncing back and forth between doing managerial, marketing, customer communication, and now ClearRaw, that I'm the only one that's really touching that in the shop. That to think that we're knocking down 5 coding jobs a week plus some other items and running the shop, you got to figure we're pretty busy. We're all busy. So there's not as much slow down time as I wish there was. Every once in a while, I just have to catch myself and go, did you really got to go and thank these people? Like, some days you're so focused and driven that I know I forget. So literally Adam and Veronica and I were here early this morning, and we had a little conversation. I was like, listen, I probably, great job on all the stuff. We need to make some time for some other things besides just this full push to get jobs done. But that's, I'm the customer driven guy that just always wanted to come through. And then the hardest thing in the world that you ever have to do as a business owner or somebody who communicates with your customers is to say no, right? So you have these longtime customers that come to you, and you already got a packed schedule, and like, hey, can you fit me in for one of these? And you're like, oh, sure, yes.
Such a hard thing.
I love you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll do it. It's just it's such a beating, but I just to hear them all kind of reiterate back how much so, even though it's a constant push, and I push hard and they push hard, to hear back how much so that they actually feel like this is an enjoyable environment.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, and they don't know, they're all young. They haven't had, like, I've had horrific experiences in jobs working for like
Sure.
stuff that you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy kind of
Yep.
stuff, So, but even at that, they still think that this is fun to show up to. They're excited. They enjoy what they do. They still get to learn a lot. Like, we all get to learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the other goal in life, is learn something new every day.
Massively. So what have you learned, because you started in 1988, right?
Yeah, I went
Was
to
it?
work for another small company detailing airplanes in 1988.
Yeah, so obviously things have changed in the last...
No, not much. Not much.
Come on.
If I showed you the first, because then they were buffers, they were not polishers. Now we have polishers, right?
It's all rotary, right?
We have modified not only the industry but the terminology within the industry
Sure.
to better suit how we want to present these things to customers. We don't buff cars anymore. We paint correct cars now, right? How often do you get asked what is paint correction?
Every time.
All the time. So yeah, there was no such thing as anything other than a rotary polisher at the time. And the very first polisher that I ever picked up was 6,000 RPM Black & Decker industrial grinder. It's a metal cased beast that probably
You had a metal
weighs
cased
12
polisher?
pounds. 6,000 RPMs and no speed control except in your trigger. And that's what I went to work polishing airplanes with.
Were you throwing a wool pad on it?
Straight wool. There wasn't anything else.
It's
So literally, you had two grades of wool.
Well, what was that?
Do you know the wool pads that they sell us now to use on the like the ones that Rupes sells? Most people don't even buy the twisted wool because it's like that's aggressive stuff, right?
Yeah.
So in the 80s, we had twisted wool and combed wool, and basically they called the companies that marketed the combed wool back then. That's the smooth. The hairs are all in a straight line. They're not coarse, twisted up wool. They
Okay.
don't cut near as hard, but we still use them as cutting tools these days. They called that a finishing pad in the 80s. That was a finishing
You were
pad.
finishing down the wool.
That was your finishing pad.
Were you able
And
to finish it
the
down?
only other kind of buffer polisher that was available at that time was like these big two-handed orbital. So we have
With
dual
the
action.
14-inch little pad,
And,
right?
and you know what they put on them to
What?
polish cars with? It was a diaper cloth, literally. It was called a diaper cloth. So it was like terry was a little too aggressive. Terry cloth, like your bath towel, was a little too aggressive, which now if you rubbed your car with a terry cloth towel, you'd have more scratches than you ever
Yep.
cared to think about. But so it was like, it literally was a diaper cloth. And those things, all they did was just orbit. There was no rotation. Like our Rupes polishers have two different types of action that actually allows us to polish cars and do the finishing work that we're capable of doing now. That's just absolutely amazing. So orbital polisher for junk. It was kind of like, that was the polisher that you spread wax with. So I never even really touched those back in the day because you couldn't really generate excessive shine with those things. You could
Yeah.
just apply things to panels with it.
Yeah.
But we were literally climbing around on airplanes and, I mean, like hard work. Up on
badass.
ladders,
Sweet.
laying on your back underneath the belly of an airplane,
Yep.
compounding it with a rotary polisher. I have some funny stories about the guy that hired me.
Give me it.
So I had,
This is the guy that hired you.
as he was the one that owned the airplane detailing
first-
business.
got
Yeah,
it.
first job in the detailing industry. My dad had told me I had a job at a car shop. I always took jobs in things that I loved. There's only a couple of them in my life that I ever took that didn't have anything to do with anything I liked.
Sure.
So I'm working in a car shop that worked on Nissan or Datsun Z cars because I had a 240Z in the late 1980s.
Nice.
God, do I wish I still had that car.
Nice.
Yes. So I'm working at the shop because I wanted to learn how to do things to this car. And I'd kind of gotten to the point where it was like, it was a limited job. I was a porter at 18 years old at this shop. And my dad knew I was frustrated. He's still involved with stuff at this little airport in Miami. And this guy had shown up that year from, I think he's from Dallas, Texas, of all things. And he's at an airport in Miami selling Teflon polishing. You would almost call it like the beginnings of coating, what kind of evolved into coatings. Teflon infused polishes for airplanes that were going to be way longer lasting than natural waxes and all this other stuff. So my dad's like, yeah, this guy's at the airport and he's detailing airplanes. He does a really good job. I know how much you like messing with your car and keeping your car clean. You should go to work for him. You know, I was disappointed in the job I had. And those jobs back then didn't make me any money. So it was like, all right, this could be kind of cool. So we set up the interview, and it's the funniest thing because this guy was big, and I'm an 18-year-old kid, just a little bit before my 19th birthday probably. He's big dude, and I'm
How do you define big?
big as in he's like the burly country boy look, right?
Cool.
Like he's probably, if my memory serves me correct, 6'2", 6'3", and probably weighed 280 or 290 pounds kind
Real
of thing.
man.
He's a big dude, big man hands,
Yeah.
right? Like I have man hands, this guy's hands dwarfed mine kind of thing. And it's the funniest thing. So you go in, and I'm sitting down in this little office at an airport talking to this guy, and he's telling me about what he does and how it's pretty challenging work. You got to be pretty tough. And I was like really into working out. I was like super athletic, super physical kid. And he had this little interview trick that he would pull on people. He kept one of those Black & Decker polishers behind his desk, and he's used to throwing those things around day in and day out, right? So he picks it up from behind his desk, and we're getting pretty close to the end of the interview. Picks it up from behind his desk, and he's got his hand over the casing on that polisher's like,
This is that 12-pound.
yes, beast.
Beast.
Metal cased beast, 6,000 RPMs. Picks it up and extends his arm one-handed, and your instinct, this is something that he learned and he did to everybody who came and interviewed. Your instinctive reaction is, he's got the handle facing me. Your instinctive reaction is to reach out one-handed. Like he's holding it one-handed, why can't I? So you grab the handle, as soon as your hand touches the handle, he immediately releases it. And you're just like, he looks at me and he goes, you're the first person who didn't let that thing touch the ground. I was like mad working out back then. Just every day in the gym, constant. So he's like, do you want a job? I was like, yeah, sure.
That's awesome. That was it.
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah. He told me stories like one of the previous employees was standing on a ladder polishing the top of a wing on an airplane. And those things spin so fast, and you know how you've played with rotary enough. When a rotary spinning this clockwise rotation hits an object on the right side of the polisher comes back.
Yep.
Dude standing up there, two hands holding onto the rotary,
On a
hits
ladder.
one of those little, on the wing of an airplane, standing on a ladder, hits something. Those things hit with so much force that it bounced back, smacked him in the face, and knocked him off the ladder. So he's telling me all the horror stories that I have to look forward to.
And this is all in your
learning how to
interview
use-
process.
He probably wasn't as strong as me.
Damn. So did you take a lot of the techniques that you learned, then and apply them in today's world, or is it kind of, lost in time?
No, I mean, it's still there for sure. And I think like rotary is kind of a lost art now, but you know as well as I do that like you get around some of the shops that really push an intense level of paint correction.
Yeah.
Or if you think at all that you want to touch sandpaper and put it on cars,
Taking
you
it out.
have to know how to use a rotary.
100%.
If you don't, your job cycle just got 15 hours longer per job. Just because of the time it takes to chase it down with the slower process of dual action polishers.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's a necessary evil. I
Sure.
think. You got to know how to use it,
Yeah.
because at some point either you're going to do paint correction, or you're just going to be a polisher, right? Don't take
Totally
that too-
different.
I hope that some of you detailers out there don't take that too wrong, but
It's the truth.
it's the truth hurts sometimes. So.
Hey, you're an OG. You can say whatever the hell you want.
I
People
try
gotta listen.
really hard to never come across as a guy who knows more than you, or who's better than you, or be insulting in any way to people.
No,
It's
you
just
can always
that's not-
learn, right? So, and a lot of guys out there are not stuck in the ways, but they think that they can go and run with anybody with a polisher.
Yeah.
I remember Jim Hutton started working. He's our main guy at the shop, and I think he's a world class guy,
Yeah.
especially in his work. And I think he can stand up for the most when it comes to polishing and working down paint. And to this day, and he's beyond humbled with this. To this day, he's always like, "Hey, I need to learn. Like, I want to go work with Kilmer. I want to go work with Patterson. I want to go work with Noxie. Right? I want to go and learn from these guys." I'm like, "What do you need to learn? You're on the same level." He goes, "No. He goes, "I'll never be on the same level." He goes, I can always learn more. I can always do something better. I can always do something different."
Everything.
So it speaks to character.
Yeah,
Big
I mean
time.
that's so fantastic. Like literally, been my attitude throughout everything I've done in my life. No matter how much so, the people that were around me looked at me and said, "You're good at this."
Yeah.
I would always, my response in the fishing world, where I spent 20 years of my life dealing with that industry and being a part of that industry, and people would be like, man, you've done so much, you know so much. I'm like, the best part of it is that every day that I wake up is another opportunity for me to learn more. I was like, you're never going to know it all.
No.
Never. But if your goal is to know as much as you possibly can, or your goal is to know it all, you got something constantly to strive for every day.
100%.
So like the guy that I teach the detailing school business with, which I wish we could do, but when COVID's been cruel to us this past year.
It'll come around.
It will come around. It's harder for him, honestly, because he's in Toronto.
Yeah.
And crossing that border right now is not a friendly thing.
No, it's not.
So, but we met through an Instagram post. I mentioned this. I decided about 5 years ago that I wanted my truck, when I was still doing mobile work, to look better than any other Tundra that you could find. And so I decided one weekend that I was going to take on the project of texture sanding it, try to reduce as much. It's an OEM paint job, so I'm not going to take every single bit of texture out of it, but I'm going to reduce it as much as possible to make the reflections exceptional.
Sure.
Way better than OEM. So I posted pictures of it, and this is my favorite part of Instagram and social media now, is that I know people all over the world that have similar interests to me. I post a picture of sanding it. He makes a comment, and that started a relationship with a guy that's basically my age and started detailing. Probably we were within 2 years of each other in our start, and he's never done anything else.
Damn.
And not long after that, I sent an invite for him to come to Houston, because I had a dealer that I used to do work for that would load me up with cars before classic sports cars, European
Sure.
sports cars, before they would get sent off to the national auctions to get sold. So they would literally, after I got started with them, they'd send me a spreadsheet a couple of weeks out before Amelia Island or Pebble Beach Concourse, where they were going to send a bunch of cars off to get auctioned. And they sent me a list one year that was like 13 cars that needed to be done in just over a week. And most of them were two-step paint corrections. Now, there's no other work involved. Like, it was one of the best gigs I ever had, because I could show up, have a car that was cleaned, washed, prepped, clayed, everything. I didn't do an interior on the car. I did my favorite part of the car. I would go and just bang out paint corrections.
Yep.
So I had all this pile of work, and I sent a message to Chris in Toronto. We didn't really know each other other than some social media communication. I said, hey man, you want to come to Houston for a week? I said, I've got this pile of cars to do. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I've polished a Ferrari since like the early 90s. Because he's in a rural area. He just wasn't getting he's piles of muscle cars. He has tons of muscle car collectors around him, but he didn't get exotics.
Sure.
He's like, man, that would be so cool. So he comes down, we spend a week knocking out two-step paint corrections per day, 5 straight days.
Damn.
And just like barreled through a pile of work, and it was a blast. And then 5 or 6 months later, he invites me to come up there, and I get to see his world. Like, I sand some cars, but I don't sand a lot of cars. This guy sands, back then he was sanding an average of 2 cars a week, and that was just part of his week's work schedule.
That's crazy.
He's so amazingly fast.
It's a lot.
If you don't know Chris Funkenhauser, he's probably one of the baddest detailers on the planet.
Damn.
Absolutely. And so I go to Toronto for the first time I ever see Toronto, fly in, straight to work.
Yep.
He literally had 3 sanding jobs and then a heavy 2-step and a coating job, and then
You two just put the headphones on and just
day.
went.
Yeah, we're just like, when we never really spent that much time around each other, but we immediately came up with a system that works well. He's super fast at sanding. He does everything by hand.
Yeah.
I'm like years of comfort with a rotary polisher, so I'm just like, yeah, you put that thing in my hand, it's pretty natural. I don't like the new guy that picks up a rotary is like, which edge can I go over? How do I have to hold the polisher? And it becomes instinctive over time. So Chris sands, I rotary cut. He comes behind me and we both start DA cutting. We wash a car, polish it, put a coating on it. We literally big cars in a day.
That's awesome. Well, why don't you speak then about your training that you guys are putting together with you two?
So, you know what? To me, I felt like there was tons and tons of detailing schools out there already, and it's just not. It's been done. It's been said so many times. Like the hardest part of what we do, the most technical side of what we do, is taking a machine and putting it on somebody's paint.
Yep.
And making that look as good as it can be. So we chose to only address that real section. So we address prep enough to say, how do you get paint ready to actually start putting a polisher on it? We cover lighting aspects, we cover angles, we cover paint measurements, various different polisher types, because there are other polishers out there that are effective, and people choose what they want to choose.
Sure.
How to use a rotary, how to sand, how to understand when you're in a safe zone, how to understand when you're not in a safe zone, and look, what does it take to get somebody who's never picked up a rotary polisher at all to get to a comfort level and understand that they can be totally safe.
Yep.
Did you see what I did at Verge last year?
No.
I had a rental VW, I forget, it was Passat or Jetta, whatever it was, and I took a rotary polisher, Rupes rotary. What do you crank that thing up to max speed?
So 8,000?
No, I think on those it's only like 25. Because my big DeWalt's are 36,
Okay.
3,600 RPMs. I think the Rupes rotary is about 2,500 RPMs, 2,600. Cranked it to max speed, put a little bit of compound on it, set it right on top of a crowned edge. The one thing that you want to avoid,
Always.
like the plague with a
Yep.
polisher, right? I don't care what polisher you have in your hand. And I put it right on top of the crown with a group of guys that all do this. This is what we do. This is how we support our families. And they're all looking at me with the eyes just popping out of their head going, oh my God, he's burning the paint straight off of that car. And I'm just sitting there talking with a smile on my face and holding the polisher with one hand. I was like, you guys think I burned it yet?
Cranked.
It's cranked. It's max RPM. And they're going, oh my God, he's burning the
This is
paint.
making me sweat just
And I
thinking
just like
about it.
roll it over onto the flat spot,
Yep.
and they can see all the paint's still there. And I was like, you guys know why the paint's still there? Because wool doesn't generate any heat. There's no pressure on the polisher. There's absolutely nothing to damage that paint. It's floating. There's tons of air pockets in wool. You know, wool is like 15 degrees cooler than polishing with a foam pad.
Wow. I didn't.
People don't know these things. But if you're the nerd that I am and you sat around with your little laser temperature finder testing things in your shop, you know them.
You find that out quick.
Well, if you burned a couple of things in your life, which is an inevitable
No matter what in
going
this
into
industry.
polishing, I don't care.
Yep.
I mean, like, I see more damage now from people picking up a dual action polisher and doing things incorrectly than I do from people picking up a rotary and doing
Yeah.
things. You know, it's weird. And in different perspective, I always looked at things in terms of how can this be better? How can it be faster? How can it be more efficient? What does it take to make processes go quickly?
Yep.
And rotary is one of those tools. Like we talked about one of the shops that you visited already that literally nearly every car that
Yeah,
comes
Clemens,
through
John
gets
Clemens.
rotary.
Every
Put the
car.
rotary
He
in.
looked at me and he goes, "Why aren't you guys using rotary?" I'm like, "Because it's rotary. It's like old time." He goes, "You're an idiot."
The only reason that we're not like grinding day in and day out with a rotary polisher is just for training. Seriously, we're too busy, and that's a crappy excuse,
Yeah.
horrible excuse.
Yep.
They all know a little bit, and I actually had to shift the polishers that I had, the rotary polishers, to make that more comfortable. People don't want to pick up that DeWalt.
No.
That DeWalt's big and heavy.
Yep.
The only reason I keep it is for a boat.
Yeah.
I have a really cool cordless Milwaukee that I love because
Sweet.
there's nothing to drag with you. You just
Yep.
like literally go where you want to go. And then you pick up that Rupes rotary, and it's probably the absolute smoothest polisher you'll ever touch.
Yeah.
It's smoother than the dual action polishers.
Yep.
You just float and have fun, man. It's like vibe. Get down.
Well, you know, Steve, I could hear the years and years and years of experience that you're sharing right now, which is so cool to hear, because I remember when I picked up, I had a Cyclone. That was my first, the little two
You got the two-headed Cyclone.
That was so my first $1,000.
One of those things I've never touched.
Never do. It's horrible. It's just as
Horribly
bad as
heavy.
that,
It's
as that,
hugely
that
heavy,
14-inch
right?
buffer from the 80s. It's the same
Hi, I
thing.
got a buffer.
Yeah, it's the same thing. But at the time, I had my first $1,000 that I started the business with, and that was the first polisher I bought, because when I was on Adam's Polishes and I was looking, that's what he recommended as being the safest, which it was. Dude, I remember I did this Raptor. It's the first truck I had to do, and it probably took me, I don't know, 3 weeks, because it was still horrible. But that's where I learned.
Sure.
But taken from that to what it was to all the technology that's out now, even in the short years I've been doing it, hearing stories of you just ripping with rotary and knowing how to take one of those in your hand and fully use it is awesome.
Have you ever listened to any like really old school guy talking about what we would do to work scratches out of single stage paint back
Yeah,
then?
I'm listening to it right now.
You'll hear Kilmer talk about it.
Yeah.
He's been around long enough to know. There's a handful of us guys that have been around long enough to know you literally could heat paint to the point where with single stage paint,
You can melt
you
it,
could
right?
push one side of the opening of a scratch across to the other side. There's a very, very, very fine line. So literally it's warming up, hot, push too hard.
It's called melting the clear, right? Is that the same deal?
It was more with the single stage. So before we even had the clears on the cars, right? It's not as effective with clears because they don't heat the same way.
Sure.
'Cause they burn through kind of thing. So the drawback to this technique was that if you got it right, it was cool. You could basically close a scratch in paint by heating enough to actually push the paint across the scratch. There's a very, very fine line between enough pressure to push the top of the scratch from one side to close the gap to the other side, and too much pressure, which just left this huge streak of wool marks in the paint that were permanent, never come out.
I love this. This is awesome.
Scary.
It's
scary, but learning that was like super, super cool.
Yeah.
We don't play on that level now because the paints react so differently than what they did back then. It's a different world. I mean, and like our world is a finite little tiny playground.
Yep.
If you ever talk to anybody about like paint thicknesses, and no matter what you do, I don't care what anybody says out there, to my knowledge, there's no such thing as a paint thickness gauge that's literally telling you what the primer thickness is, what the base coat thickness is,
Sure.
and what the clear coat thickness is. And most people don't understand. We only get to polish clear coat.
That's it.
We do not get to polish anything below clear coat.
Nope.
So with that in mind, I came up with a system a few years back that I was like, all right, we have to be able to teach people that if you take the paint gauge that all of us have, I don't care if it's a $1,600 paint gauge or a $149 paint gauge that gives you a paint thickness reading, you have total film thickness from metal base to the top, right? It shoots a beam down, hits a solid object, reflects back. The time that it reflects back tells that machine the thickness of the total paint, right? So now we have to kind of modify those systems to understand what's a safe playground for us to work within to be able to polish a scratch out. And I literally sat around because we would always pick up takeoff panels from a body shop to use when we're teaching. You want something that it doesn't matter if you destroy it or not, right? And you want to actually let somebody burn through the paint so that they see it as it happens.
For sure.
Because then you have a better understanding
That's the right way to
of
teach 'em.
what's right before.
Yep.
What is right before that? And you never know what it's going to feel like to burn through paint if you don't do it.
Yep.
So go do it. Have some fun.
Love it.
And burn through it in a fun environment.
Oh, I've burnt.
But like I would take measurements up to that point and taking OE paint measurements, normal, maybe polished on a little bit, and then all the way to the point where you burn it through and watch the difference. I came up with a number that basically I will never tell anybody to take more than 20% of the total paint thickness reading that they see off of any OEM paint job.
Sure.
Anything beyond that, you're getting into a gamble zone.
Yep.
You're getting into a zone where the next thing may be, guess what, you're repainting somebody's
Burn.
paint.
Yep. So we got to talk about your Able too and how it's helped transform your business as you've grown and built this incredible team, which we'll get into next. But I was the same way too, using old school ways of the 2x3 foot calendar and writing out schedules on it and hoping that my team would understand what's coming in and what's going out. So how is, since bringing on your Able, as technologies advance with not just polishers in the way that you hammered down paint, but how has it also transformed your business on that end?
I mean, it's huge. It's funny, like you said that, so I still have a desk calendar sitting on the little desk up there that I don't sit behind very often.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's on October of last year. If that tells you anything, like the transition has happened. But it made me think of one of the funniest things about that. The only person in the shop that knew what we were going to do next was me.
Yeah.
This is all written on a calendar. They didn't have any access. My employees didn't have any access to it. And I think that's one of the things that they all brought up was that they can literally wake up in the morning, be groggy-eyed, wiping the sleep out of their eyes, and look at their phone and go, "Oh, cool! We're working on a Ferrari today, or whatever it is, whatever it may be." So that was kind of cool. The full-on scheduling aspect of it, which I would say we fully utilize the scheduling side of it. We're huge on utilizing the quoting pricing side of the system. Every customer for me needs to see an in writing, honest explanation of what we're going to do to their car so that they know. I mean, like as a consumer, I wouldn't make that level of decision without feeling fully informed and without seeing it in writing. Is it real? Like, I mean, there's tons of, everybody wants to do it. So usually the customer calls you up, they want, what is the number? So not only am I going to finish a phone call with the number, but I'm going to finish the phone call with that number in writing now that says, yeah, I agreed to this and I'm going to stand behind this. So they get something more tangible out of us before they ever work with us.
Yep.
I think that's phenomenal. We utilize the time clock. It's super simple and easy for the employees to literally come in. We start on a job, they clock in. I won't say we're utilizing all of it because I know that you can clock in and out of specific jobs within the system, but we at least track their hours daily through the system, pause at lunch, come back after lunch, in the end of the day. That's directly tied to our QuickBooks system. So our payroll checks come quickly and simply from that system. Every customer gets a finalized, in writing PDF, in writing. You can tell how old school I am. We don't write anything anymore, right? It's all on a computer now.
Yep.
So they get a PDF invoice. The transmission from us to them of these pieces is so super fast and simple. Like Adam talked about it, he does a fair amount of this. Like, I'm still so old school. If I have to call or text a customer, I'm going to go pick up the phone and I'm going to start scrolling through the contacts. Where literally you can click on the job, click on the customer, and push text or push call, and you can do it. And I'm that idiot that's so old that I'm still picking up the phone, scrolling through. What is that guy's name? Did I program his number? But it's all there.
It's all there.
We put so one of the other things that we've implemented, and I've talked to Adam about, as soon as I understood the values of this tool, was every single time we answer the phone and we speak to a customer, put them in the phone, build a quote. So there's two great aspects of that. One, the side that I said that I really like for customers to see things in writing from us, because I think
Sure.
it's a positive reassurance to the customer that we're actually going to do something that we talked about. And then it's in writing so they know, did I forget some of what he said? Well, it's right there. It's all there.
Well, it's your business, especially with your team, which is the last point I want to get on with. Your Able helps transform a business, but also helps you be able to run it a lot smoother and be out here doing what you do best too, while it's running for you. One thing you've done a great job at is building this family here. So, and you've given them a livable wage, which is big too. You're not going and cutting them at the knees and being like, hey, here's, $10 an hour. You're actually giving them something that they can actually.
It's like 11 here.
11, so even better. Overtime.
We've what we did that's fun there, for speaking of employees, like it's tough to build a shop and develop a shop and pay big chunks of money out to people. Yep. While they're in the training phases. But what we've created was some incentivizing systems where Adam helped a ton with implementing a weekly system where they grade themselves and then we grade them on the same criteria, and based upon that they can at least $150 to $150 extra in bonus a week. One of the things, I'll tell you something else really cool. I'm sorry to all the business owners who utilize your Able. We have a tipping option for every customer that pays a tab. And Adam and I came to the joint conclusion recently that we've accumulated some significant tips, because people on signing of a bill see the tipping option.
Just click.
They just click one, and it's percentage based. So randomly, I think we might have collected over $1,500 in tips last month. And what we decided was we were going to distribute that back to the employees. So on top of hourly pay, on top of weekly bonus that's available to them, now because of your Able, I'm sure my employees are pretty thrilled about this, we have a tracking of the tips. Prior to that, they just went into my pocket. I don't know what happened to them. They were green things, so they went into my pocket. Kidding. But seriously, now we have it tracked, and we can, at the end of the month, create one more bonus for the employees that's going to make their lives that much better. Yeah. So I mean, I thought that was really cool, just discovery that was just randomly there in front of us in your Able.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's cool. You're a badass dude, and you've built a badass company.
Don't tell anybody.
With some, I won't tell anybody. But with some great people here, and like I said, the energies that when I walked into this place were ones I'd want to be surrounded on and by more often. So, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother.
Man, it's been an absolute blast having you guys here. So much fun getting to come and hang out last night, and then all day in the shop juggling boom stands and microphones and camera angles and lighting
Yep.
has been cool. But getting
been
to know you guys all better. And damn it, I apologize for not inviting you guys to go to the racetrack.
That's all right. We're gonna come down and get some
We're
fishing.
definitely doing
So we're
it.
gonna
Fishing,
have to go on your boat. I know these guys that
racetrack.
keep asking if they can get in the bay with you.
Yeah,
And get out there and see some sharks.
The sharks aren't that bad. Seriously, man.
They're only as bad as
Do
when
you
they get
see any
you.
shark bites? Seriously, I'm good, man. I've walked in that water for years.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for opening your door, man. Thank you for introducing us to your whole team and allowing us to be here. Thank you to Michael, Chris, and Kyle, everybody over at You're Able. Thank you, everybody at Cinescope. Make sure you go online, sign up for the free 30-day trial. And as always, keep shining. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.